Today's guest is one of rugby's most enduring and imposing figures, a player who defined an era at Leicester Tigers with 314 games, 48 caps for England, 6 for the Lions. He played in 3 World Cups, 1987, 1991 and 1995, and he's toured with the British and Irish Lions twice in 89 and 93. He has a reputation of one of the most feared and best number 8s in world rugby. In 1996, he was awarded an MBE for services to rugby. Dean Richards didn't just play the game, he embodied it, known for his socks rolled down, his uncompromising style, and his ability to lead from the front. As a coach and director of rugby, he took Leicester to 4 straight Premiership titles and won 2 European Cups with them, 2001 and 2002, being the first side to retain the trophy. He guided Harlequins in Newcastle and has rebuilt cultures wherever he went. He coached and played in France. Yes, he's seen some controversy along the way, but he's shown resilience, returning to lead and inspire again at top level. Dean Richards is more than just an enforcer. He's a strategist, a builder of teams, and a leader who knows when to turn standards into silverware. Today, we're diving into leadership, resilience, and why in rugby and business, there's no going backwards. Dean Richards, welcome to the business end.
How are you, chaps? You well?
We are
Very well,
indeed.
Dean.
We're well.
Thanks for joining us.
That's all right.
So, Dean, you played over 300 times for Leicester and you were the heartbeat of an English back row. What was in your DNA, do you think, that made you a great performer?
I think everybody sort of looks at trying to develop your DNA, and I think if you're a nice guy, you're a nice guy, and you've got a bit of an edge about you, you'll always have an edge about you. And I'd got 2 parents who are incredibly competitive, and that sort of transferred to both myself and my sister's genes. And whatever we did, we didn't like losing. We just wanted to win it all, at all costs, almost all the time. And we'd end up fighting, scrapping with our parents or arguing the toss with them. And you get that competitive edge right from day one. You'd have a game of cards with your parents, and they wouldn't let you win like other parents would. You had a game of football in the backyard, and there's no way they were going to let you win, and you had to win yourself. So, and that's it's the way I was brought up, and I think it's in your genes. It's the parents that I've got, and I think it's sort of transferred that way.
Fair enough. And you were a policeman before the game went pro. Did that have any influence on how you saw your career, how it went, how it developed? Did you learn any lessons from that part of your life?
Yeah, huge amount actually. I mean, you've got to bear in mind in the first 5 years as being a policeman, I was one of the Robert Black murders. I was involved in one of those in a very small way. The Colin Pitchfork murders, which is the first time they used DNA to secure a conviction for murder throughout the world. I was involved in that in a small way. I was involved in the miners' strike. I was one of the bobbies that found Ravindra Mahacha, the Indian diplomat who'd been kidnapped from Birmingham. In the first 5 years of my policing, I'd seen a huge amount of action, of really interesting sort of high profile stuff. And then when you all of a sudden become an England player in 86, as I did do, in 87, you sort of you kick on again. The things that other people sort of found daunting, having experienced all of these sort of things, you're sort of a little bit more at ease with it all. Going out in front of 100,000 people is fine, but if you're in a race ride down on the Lascelles Road in Handsworth, which it was, one night, and you're being pelted by bricks from either side, it's a very different thing altogether. And the crowds and the occasion never sort of worried me in any way or fazed me in any way. I think the police sort of helped me in that respect. It helps you accept things a little bit easy, take things in very quickly. You knock on a door and you don't know what's going to confront you as soon as that door's opened. Is it going to be a guy with a knife, a gun, or whatever, or an old biddy? You have to make a very quick, split-second decision as to what your actions are. And in that respect, decision making on the hoof very quickly became a strong point of my game.
Actually, Dean,
Oh,
coming on to that, I was going to say that I've spoken to one guy. I think you played with him in the past. He's a police guy, and he was talking about leadership in conflict. And he was saying sometimes when you're a team on the ground, you have to react very quickly and perhaps ignore the instructions from above. Is that? I think I've read articles from you in the past where you said that being in the police force actually taught you to react very quickly on the
Yeah,
pitch around you. Would that?
yeah, things change
Yeah.
in front of you, don't they? You know, you're going out there, you're expecting blue skies, and all of a sudden the heavens open, or or you're expecting their nine to do something. He goes off early, brings on a different nine who plays in a totally different way. You've got a right-footed kicker at 10, then he goes off. You've got a left-footed kicker, or the same at 9. All these things, everything changes, and it's the ability to be able to adapt to it and make the right decisions as you adapt, which is I think key to a lot of success. And I think a lot of people can't, don't have the resilience, and they don't have the ability to adapt as well and accordingly.
Yeah,
sorry,
sorry,
Mo, go
Fitz.
on.
No, you go on, Fitzy. Go on.
I was going
Sorry.
to say, I mean, it must give you, well, in putting things in perspective, as you just outlined there, when you've been in a race ride or the miners' strike, and then you're out in Twickenham, it changes your perspective maybe, and being able to react and being able to communicate with different people and have that empathy to understand them, has got to be great as a leader and also as a coach, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I think one of the strengths of good leaders is that ability to, and I say this to a lot of the coaches that I work with, is that ability to make everybody feel special. It's the ability to make the guy who thinks he's special feel special, but in the eyes of the other people to be treated exactly the same. And so he's not, in their eyes, being treated in an elite way, but you're giving and buffing him up and massaging his ego to the point that he does think that he's special, but also keeping him on a level footing as well, so he doesn't overstep the mark. And yet the other guys, you're doing almost exactly the same with them, but buffing them up, massaging their ego, making them feel better. It's that ability to be able to do that, but in the eyes of everybody else, keep everybody sort of on a level footing, feeling as though they've all been treated exactly the same.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, going back as well, I mean, in terms of we talked, but obviously Fitzy's asked about your DNA, and there's a couple of things perhaps people don't know about you is the fact you speak French, and you go on about your competitive background, and you went to France to play rugby. Was that right when you were about 18?
Yeah,
Um,
listen, I wasn't an academic at all. My parents always
yeah,
wanted me to be I don't know, an engineer, a doctor, or whatever it was, and I was never going to be that. And I'd taken economics, computer studies, general studies, and whatever I'd taken at A level. But I actually didn't turn up for the exams, didn't bother turning up. So I just got zero interest in academia. I didn't want to go to university. And so before the exam results came out, we've got a family friend who'd got contacts over in France. We'd made contact with them. And by the end of June of the year of my A-levels, I was over in France working as a campus mate in a haulage company. And went down to the local rugby club, which was Roanne, ROANE at the time, and went down there to play in the academy. And as it happens, we started doing the pre-season training, came to the first pre-season friendly game, and I did well in that. And they ended up picking me in the second row for Roanne for the rest of the season. So yeah, I spent virtually a year over there playing second division rugby. And if anybody knows what it was like in those days, it was pretty brutal. There was a lot of oddly enough, I mean, we joke about it, but there was a lot of deaths on the field of play over in France in those days.
really?
A huge amount, and as a result of violence. And it's an
Yeah.
incredibly brutal and violent place. And to go there as 17 and 18-year-old lad, I grew up very, very quickly. I really did. So,
Yeah. And you picked up, I mean, it shows a great deal because you learned French there. Adaptability. I mean, sometimes you said that perhaps the French that you learned was a bit colorful at
yeah,
times. Yeah.
I think we were talking the other day, and it's but the second international I played in was against France over in Paris, and And the French president of the FFI came over and he said, "Look," he said, I hear you've played in France for a bit." And so we sat down talking for about half an hour, and totally in French. And at the end of it, he said, "Dean, he said, it's been a real pleasure to chat with you. It's been very nice. Thank you very much." I said, "That's very kind of you." He said, "Yeah, but just one thing." He said, you do swear a lot." And I didn't even realise I was swearing.
Yeah, yeah. No, it was. I mean, France, and as you say, was. I mean, it's absolutely brutal place to play, but it's a great. I'm sure as an 18-year-old, it was a great place to build or have a platform to build on, because I would have thought everything in England would have been a breeze compared to that.
Yeah, in some ways, it's just very different, isn't it?
Yeah.
I came back to England, and by chance, Bill Brown, who lived just up the road from us, said, "I've got a contact over in Coventry or Leicester," because he played for both clubs, and he said, "Would you'd like an introduction?" I'd played England schoolboys, and so I said, "Yes, please." So the first ones were Leicester, who showed an interest, and he said, "Look, just go training. You'll be playing. If you're good enough, you'll play for the youth team, or you'll train with them for the rest of the season and see if you can get a game." I went over there, and I think I trained for 3 or 4 weeks, and at the end of that time, they picked me for the Easter tour down to Wales, and I ended up playing against Neath as an 18-year-old. So it was right towards the end. So I left just before the end of the season over in France. So I ended up getting a game in the right at the end of the season against Neath on the Easter tour, which was again a bit of an eye opener. But if you've been over in France and you get every game as a punch up, going down to Neath, it was. It's very similar, actually, to be honest with
you. Yes, it is.
Yeah. And going on to your leadership style and building great teams. Obviously, you captain at Leicester as well, and I mean, you were like Mr. Leicester, basically, and you helped turn a good side into a dynasty. I mean, what was your leadership style, and how did you build a team there that's lasted for so long?
But I don't think that you can credit any one person for building a Leicester team into being what it is. Leicester is Leicester. It's a huge club and will always evolve and move forward, and has the ambition to be that, the top club in England, in Britain, in Europe, year after year after year. And if it doesn't succeed with said coach, then they will change and they will adapt and they'll move forward. And they're not afraid to make big decisions, as was shown with myself, with Geordie Murphy, Richard Cockrell, all these sort of boys as well, who are all ex-players. Whether they get it right or wrong is another thing, or whether they understand exactly how things are evolving and why things and decisions are made. They probably don't know, and it depends upon the individual. But in terms of myself and leadership, I'd captained the club for 5 years. Been on all the selection committees and everything else like that, leading up to every game prior to the game becoming professional. And then when Bob Dwyer came in, he then sort of changed it slightly, and then when he went, they sort of threw me into the mix as I think head coach to begin with, and then ultimately became director of rugby. And I didn't know whether I was leading well. I didn't know whether I was making the right decisions or not, but things seemed to work. And I think people say it's difficult when you thrust into an environment whereby you're actually managing your own mates and players and whatnot. But in some ways, for me, I thought it was a little bit easier, because you understood your mates, you understood what was required, and providing that you dealt with everybody in an honest way, and whereby they understood exactly where they were, whether it be in the pecking order, why they were selected, why they weren't selected. You dealt with them in a way whereby they created that understanding of wanting to be in the team, and you'll give them the pathway to getting right up there. And if not, then it's their decision, but we will have tried everything for them to reach the pinnacle of their career. Then people will be quite happy staying at a club like Leicester. And we're very fortunate that over the years leading up to Bob coming in, we'd built a really core group of players. Bob came in, lasted I think about 2 years, 2.5 years, and then I took over after that. I think he brought in Stranners, Joel Stransky, and Fritz van Heerden. I think they were the two boys that he brought in. Joel, when Bob went down to Bristol, Joel left, and I think went down to Bristol. I'm not sure. Fritz eventually went home, and both those boys were replaced by guys like Andy Good, Austin Healy, Ben Kay came in from Waterloo. And the team evolved as very much a local team. And I brought in Pat Howard from over in Australia as well, from the Brumbies over there. And again, Pat came in as a player coach as well. So yeah, it sort of evolved, but you don't know whether you're making the right or the wrong decision. It evolves. There was a DOR course that was run by the RFU, which I went on, and you pick up little snippets from there. But again, it's sorting the wheat out from the chaff. What suits you, what doesn't suit you, and then you use things at certain times. But as you evolve and as you gain experiences, you pick up little bits and pieces, and you use them to your advantage whenever you need to.
Would you say you're a different
Sorry.
leader? Sorry, you go on, Fitz. You go on.
I was just want to clarify there. I mean, you said the listening to you there, it sounds like the role was thrust onto you with circumstance. Did you have any aspirations to be a coach after you'd finished playing? Was this something that you thought about, or was it just circumstantial that it happened?
No, it's. I was in the final year of a contract at Leicester. The game had just turned professional. I'd taken a sabbatical from the police. It had come round to the sort of November, December, January time. I'd had meetings and chats with Coventry and Moseley. I'd been over to see Doug Ellis at Aston Villa, who was working with Paul White over there. And then I got a phone call now, either in the January or the February of that season, to go to the club on a Sunday morning. And I walked in, they said, look, we've dispensed with Bob's services. We'd like you to take over as caretaker manager to the end of the season. Would you do it? And I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose. So I said, yeah, I'd do it. I rang up John Wells that night and I said, look, this is what's happened. Do you want to come on board as forwards coach? He came on board as forwards coach. I've got Joel Stransky asked Stranners if he would be the player coach from an attack point of view, which he was quite happy to. And then you have to sit down in front of all your players and just say, look, this is what's happened. And no longer am I playing alongside you. I'm actually going to be leading in a different way. But I'll still be the same person I was sort of 10 minutes ago or 24 hours ago. So, and you try to be that person all the way through. Although you do change and you see different experiences. The bigger picture you see more so than the players do. And I think when you've been in that role, you understand why the bigger picture has a massive influence on sometimes on selection, or on the way the team evolves, on facilities and everything else like that. And it just opens your eyes and broadens your horizons as to how a club's run and what goes on in it.
Yeah, is it fair to say? I mean, when you started at Leicester, it was more like you instinctively leading. I mean, you obviously brought in a team which we hear a lot that you trust, and that was important for you, like John Wells and Joel Stransky. So, do you think like your leadership style has changed over the last 20 years?
I think as a policeman, I think you have to adapt to every situation. And I think my sort of leadership style sort of adapted and evolved all the way through. I've always liked to have fun, and I think every player that I've worked with will understand that. I like to have a beer, I like to go out in the town with the boys and everything. But I also expect boys to turn up on, if you're out in the town and we're going to be in at 8 o'clock in the morning training, then you're in at 8 o'clock in the morning and you give it your all. But, and it's just, it's the quid pro quo, isn't it? But I think you do change, and you can't treat everybody the same, can you? there's no doubt that both of you boys have different personalities, and the way that I would treat both of you from a coaching point of view would be very different, and the way I'd approach you to get the best out of you. And probably you, Liam, I probably have to crack the whip with, because you look fucking lazy, to be honest with you.
That's well spotted, Dean. Well spotted.
Don't start.
Thank you, Justin. But it didn't take much, did it?
Well, I could tell you a story about playing Leicester, but as you were coaching there, maybe I shouldn't tell the story about one day we played you in the Cheltenham and Gloucester Cup, and one of your props has been a bit lazy, and he's quite fearsome, and he'd been playing for England the night before, so but I won't get him into trouble.
I know exactly who you're talking about, and Garth's a great lad, and you wouldn't get him into trouble at all.
Yeah, no. I mean, much to the credit. I mean, I told that story where Fitzy, you weren't playing that day, and we had a very young front row. We had a hooker who was about 18, a guy Andy Flavin who's over in Connacht, and then the tight head prop who's in Dublin, who was just converting from a number 8, and we're playing Leicester up at Welford Road, and Garforth went down into the first scrum and said, "Look, Liam, I've just been out the night before, I've been on the bench for England," and you could smell the intoxication. It didn't smell great, Dean. And
a whiff of Christmas off of his breath.
Well, it's a mixture of aftershave and beers. So I said, "Yeah, no problem. Yeah, we're just no push." And Dick Best was very pleased with our performance in the front row, but I didn't have the guts to tell him why.
Do you not think, though, that's the measure of the guy, Darren Garforth, to actually turn out for the club the following day? What a guy. And every club has the different characters who will, who are either the enforcers, the guys with the right ideas, and all this sort of stuff. And Darren led and set the culture and the tone for the club by example. And turning out on that day meant that there's no going back for your Jonos, your Backers, your Austins, the guys who were playing on a regular basis for England. Because if they'd ever come back to the club and said, "I don't want to play next weekend, so I'm tired," you've got people like Darren who would just turn around and say, yeah, are you bigger than the club? Because you're not bigger than the club, mate. Sort yourself out. And that's why he was so important.
Yeah, which in fairness, Dean, he probably knew he was in for an easy afternoon, so he's quite happy to play against me on a Sunday. But it does lead nicely into my next question. You've mentioned Garforth, and we talk about cultural architects of teams or in the corporate world, and Willie Anderson refers to them as warriors. But who were the lieutenants you trusted to carry your standards on the pitch, and why?
At Leicester, almost everybody. It was the nature of the team. Very few players wouldn't, and just purely because there's this die for the team, dying for your mates attitude, and you'd just give 100% every time. If you left anything on that field, then the other boys would be begging the question why. And you like, I like that sort of attitude virtually everywhere you go and everywhere I've been, and I'd like to create an environment whereby if somebody doesn't put it in, then the boys will actually question why he's not put it in, rather than myself. And if ultimately it comes down to me, then it'll be a question of, well, actually your contract's up at the end of the year, because I can't be having somebody who isn't here for the team. So you create the environment, the culture whereby the boys will police that themselves, and then if they can't, because this guy's not falling in, then ultimately you have to do the dirty deed.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's the leaders on the pitch that raise the standards.
Totally. And it's not just on the pitch; it's off the pitch. I had a great guy, Nilly Latu, up at Newcastle, and his first day in, first thing he did was he swept the change room.
Wow. Yeah.
And didn't even think about it; just swept the change room. Next time round, swept the change room again, and there was 2 or 3 of the boys doing it. And by the end of the third week or whatever, everybody was just tidying up after themselves. It's just those little things which which make people stand out above other people and give them that little bit of edge, and in terms of leadership, and people want to follow guys like that as well, and people that follow Lily Latu into battle any day of the week. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. So, Dean, you've been to the top of the mountain, part of Grand Slams, World Cups, Lions Tours. How do you define elite performance, and what's in your mind separates the good from the great?
I always elite performance is, for me, it's somebody who is never satisfied, who always understands that there is more to come, more to give, and is striving to be a better person. And in your mind and my mind, we may look at somebody and say, what a performance that is right up there. But in their mind, they'll come off the pitch or they'll come off the track and they'll say, I could have got a bit more. I need to do this. And elite performance for me is about, it's this never-ending cycle of trying to get better, trying to improve, and it just never stops. And so a performer for me is somebody right at that top level who is trying to improve on everything they've done before.
Is there someone in your mind, a teammate or opponent that would fit into that definition?
Yeah, loads of people at Leicester. Well, loads of people at every team that I've been to, and it doesn't matter sort of what your capabilities are. If your level is X, Y, or Z, but you're constantly trying to attain a better performance, a better level, to improve upon yourself, then that elite performance at your level is right up there. And for you, it depends on what your level is and what you're trying to attain. A person that everybody talks about is Monty Johnson, and for various reasons, great leader, going over the top and everything else like that. On the field, absolutely fantastic. But what people don't realise is what a great leader, strategist he was, how he understood the game and how well he understood. And I also like Sam Warburton as well. When I listen to Sam Warburton speak, I think he is extremely good as well. But you come in at half time with Jono, and you'd be sat down there with the boys would be sat down there. You'd have 10 or 15 minutes as it is now, and you'd say, right, boys, what do you think? And I go to Jono first of all, and I'd have a list on my hand, a list on a piece of paper, and I'd be sitting down there and I would just be crossing it off, and you get down to the bottom and I'm thinking, fuck, what am I going to say at half time now? And then at the end of the game, you'd sit down with these same, and he was that good. He understood it that well. And at the end of the game, you'd sit down and you'd say, well played today. I thought you boys played well. And he said, no, listen, I thought I did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong, and this wrong. And we need to work on this. And some boys have this ability to be able to understand acutely exactly what they need to do, where they went wrong, what they need to work on. And they're the boys that constantly are on that sort of, I need to get better, we need to do that. And they're the boys you love working with because there's no stopping them. So you're almost holding them back every time. And yet there's boys you'll sit in the change room with and say, off that third scrum in the second half, when you went down the blind side, what were you thinking? He said, well, did we have a third scrum in the second half? I can't remember that. And you do get players like that. And then you'll say, well, have a look at the video, and then we'll have a chat on Monday. They'll come in on the Monday and said, yeah, I still can't quite get it. And yet somebody like Jono and Austin and boys like that, they would just sit down, they would go bang, and they'd nail it. They'd bring it to you almost immediately after the game, saying, fuck, third scrum, second half, right, what were we doing? We need to address that. And they're the boys, the ones that you're having to hold back the whole time. They're the guys you love to work with.
Cornerstone of your team for sure.
Yeah, very much so. But if you've got a team full of those, then you're in the right. You're going in the right direction. And it's the boys that aren't like that you're constantly having to educate and to bring it to speed, and they hold the team back a little bit. And sometimes you'll have a guy who physically hasn't got the capabilities. I was speaking to somebody from the SS, and they were saying that three things which are, they'll look for: the physical capabilities, whether they're capable, whether they've got the mental aptitude to to actually carry out what they've been told to do. And then the third thing is whether they want it at all.
Mm.
And for some of the boys, you'll get guys who have got, from a rugby point of view, you've got, want it definitely. They've got the mental ability to be able to understand what's required, but haven't quite got the physical sort of. They're not quite the physical specimen. You would, out of the three of them, that's probably the one thing that you would probably forgo slightly. All right, to get the team going forward. But if you lose out on the third one or the second one, you're constantly having to it's holding the team back. But the physical capabilities is a slightly different thing. If he's so far off it, then you can't go down that line. But it's that mental side of things. If they can't take it in and they don't want it, you can't have them in the team. You really can't.
Yeah, absolutely. As as Willie said as well to us, his category of team members, it was warriors, waivers, and he said wankers. I'll say it on live on air, and but I can see that with Leicester. But Willie said to us, if he's got 6 or 7 warriors in his team, he's on to a good thing. And you educate the wanderers and the waverers. Well, perhaps you, the wanderers you speak to and find out what's going on with them. But there's only so much of that you would take. Would it be fair to say though, at Leicester, I mean, they're a formidable team at that time, Dean, that pretty much all of them were warriors. I doubt if you had any kind of people that were wavering on the side.
There weren't many. In fact, they didn't really get a choice because every training session would be so competitive, and because the squad was so competitive in itself. People don't forget that Leicester team of that sort of era were a lot of them were local boys.
Yeah,
and there was the Kovskins that could come over, and you got the local Leicester boys, Leicestershire boys, and a couple of boys from Nottingham Way and everything, but from within about 30 miles of Leicester, 30, 40 miles, there's it took probably 92% of the squad, and that competitiveness within the group was absolutely massive. So there was no room for anybody who didn't want it or wasn't prepared to try and learn or want to learn, because they'd be left behind. And in some respects, you go to Quins, you go up to Newcastle, you create that environment where people will always be striving to learn and will always want it. But the level of sort of detail that they perhaps look at and understand and the physical capabilities probably aren't quite as good as your John O's and your Backies and guys like that. And that's where that's sometimes where the gulf sort of appears.
Yeah.
They want it just as much, and they're quite prepared to put the body on the line for the mates and everything. But at the same time, if they're not quite there physically, and they're not quite as detailed as some of these other boys, and it doesn't happen as quickly, then that's when the gulf starts to appear a little bit.
Would you say, just jumping on that, like Neil Back, at that time he would have been perceived as physically quite small for an open side, but I mean, he was so tough. I mean, what would your thoughts be on him?
I thought that Backy was ahead of his time.
Yeah.
I thought the comments about him being too small were just totally unfounded. I just didn't see what other people saw in him at all, in terms of the size being an issue. For me, I thought I first saw him play for England under 20s, I think it was, against Romania when England played there in '89, and I think he scored 3 tries, and he was unbelievable. And I rang up the Leicester coach. I said, this guy, I think it was at Nottingham at the time, or I think it was Coventry or Nottingham. So he went from Coventry on, and I just said, this guy has got to come to us. And spent the next 3 years courting him, saying, Backy, when are you going to come down to us? And eventually came down to, next 2 years, came down to Leicester. And he was unbelievable. How he never got the recognition before when he did, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think it was a case at that time they were looking at back row and they're trying to convert number 8s to open side, and and there was a big thing about size, but I mean, he was an amazing mate. He was probably one of the toughest players I've ever kind of played against. So hard.
Depends what you want from your open side. If
Yeah,
you want somebody who's juggling over the ball, somebody who's a link player who will be in and get the ball away, and like a second 5'8", you've got the skills whereby he could have played fly half, inside centre, outside centre, flanker. It was unbelievable in terms of his ability. And yet, people like Jack Rowell wanted a massive back row to be confrontational, and which worked on occasions. But for me, you have horses for courses.
yeah,
And I'll keep on saying to the boys sometimes on selection, it is a horses for courses scenario. To beat these boys, we need the ball in and away quickly. To beat these boys, these other boys, you need to be totally confrontational, and you will pick a side which is different.
yeah,
And it's become far more that way now than it ever has done. But certainly in those days, you could turn around and say, to Jack, why didn't you pick Backy more? Because certainly against New Zealand in '95 in the World Cup, you'd have needed him there. So,
yeah. And he's incredibly tough as well. He'd be tougher than.
he's a tough boy, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And going on now to, I mean, obviously, the career developed. There's some, documented things that happened to you, and it's fair to say after the huge highs, you've also had some big lows. But how do you overcome adversity and rebuild your career, and even your reputation sometimes?
Yeah. First of all, from the Bloodgate point of view, I got banned for 3 years, and just touching on that, it's one of these things whereby you do something, you think it's wrong, and your gut instinct says it's wrong, and you still do it. Then you expect everything that you get. But there I was the day after being banned for 3 years, and I was sat at home, and there's a 90-year-old next door neighbour came round, knocks on the door at about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. And he said, "Do you mind if I come in, Dean?" And I said, "Yeah, not a problem." And he came in and he'd got a Tesco carrier bag with 4 cans of Tetley Bitter in it. And I said, "Do you fancy a cup of coffee?" He said, "No, well, we'll have a beer, shall we?" And he opened up the bag, put the beers on the table, and we sat down. And he said, "Have I ever told you my story? And my life story?" I said, "No." And he then talked me through his experiences of his involvement in the Second World War, when he was captured by the Nazis. He put in a prisoner of war camp. He escaped, spent something like 6 or 8 months trying to get across. Talked through all his fighting and everything else like that. And at the end of this, I'm sat there absolutely gobsmacked, listening to this, what I think is a hero. And he said to me right at the end, he said, "And you've got a few problems, have you?" And I went, "Well, nothing like that, no." And he said, "Well," I said, "No." So that's unbelievable what you've told me, and I sort of totally understand what you're getting at. And every problem you have, and everything that you can sort of quantify, qualify, understand, where you are. And if you relate to something like that, you think, well, the problems I've got are absolutely nothing compared to what this guy has gone through. And I sat down there after he went, and I just thought, what a lovely bloke. And he'd taken the time out, bought 4 cans of beer to come and just sit down with me, and just to say, look, your problems aren't that bad. So they may seem big at the moment, but they'll, in time, they'll. And you do, and providing you're honest with yourself, you understand that A, you fucked up massively. B, do you love the game? If so, are you out of love with the game? Will you come back? And I sort of fell out of love with it a little bit, because there's a big battle going on between myself and the lawyers from the ERC. I was trying to find out what I could do and what I couldn't do, and getting for me, the one thing you don't want to do is to compromise your children and everything else like that. And even turning around to ERC and saying, "Look, what can I do? Can I go and watch my kids play rugby? Is this to the extent of what?" And then it all comes out, that I've been challenging it, and but understanding where you stand and accepting it, and falling out of love with it for a little while, but then watching your kids play and then falling back in love with it through watching your kids play and then getting another opportunity. It was absolutely massive for me because I didn't, I didn't think that I'd get another opportunity, and I'd started to look at various other things. But yeah, I mean, to get another chance, I've got to say, I'm hard to see more Curdy up at Newcastle. To get that second chance was absolutely massive.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that you took that chance with Newcastle. But what would be your biggest tip for kind of getting off the floor? Whether life, business, what would you say?
I think the biggest impact it was never upon me personally. It's always the family, and you always think about your family and the impact upon them, your wife, your kids, your parents, your grandparents, and you worry about the impact upon them more than anything. And I think that having seen so much in the police and been involved in so much, you sort of tend to understand you can rationalize things a lot more easily, and you can compartmentalize it, push it to one side, and then sort of move forward a little bit. But from a kid's point of view, who are far less resilient than me, and a wife and parents who haven't seen the same things that I'd seen, is a very different thing altogether. And that was the biggest impact on me, was actually seeing them suffer as a result of my actions. And yeah, I thought that was terrible. And actually trying to sort of bridge those little gaps, but make amends, make life easier and whatever. But it wasn't easy for them at all. And that's the thing that hurt most of all.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So, and as an individual for myself, I'd got no doubt that I could cope after it. And, I was resilient enough, but it wasn't me. If I was on my own, no problem at all. But the impact upon other people is what affects you more than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes you a bit more precarious as a human, doesn't it? And in terms of if you've got family that you're worried about,
and people may turn around and say, why didn't you think about that when you were making the decision? But you get caught up in the heat of the moment. Everybody else is doing it. And then when you get caught, you make a wrong decision or a wrong decision for a reason, and they're the things which sort of compound themselves. And actually, right from the start, if we said no, then there wouldn't have been an issue. And I think, like I said earlier on, if your gut instinct says no, then don't do it. And the impact of that for me was obviously on myself, but also ultimately the thing that hurt most of all, the impact that it had on my family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's change tact a little bit and talk about Moo and I've discussed this with all our guests, how difficult transitioning from being a player to to coach business life and finishing up player can be incredibly different. How did you handle personally? I mean, we spoke about a little bit there in terms of it sort of being thrust on you, but how did you personally deal with the transition from being, a very famous player into becoming that coach and then director of rugby?
I just worked incredibly hard. I didn't know, I'd never coached before, I'd never managed before, and I was thrust into that position. So I was in a position whereby I just went and sat in the video room, just detail after detail after detail, understanding the finer detail of everything, to the nth degree. And even then, you're constantly learning, because one of the things you do learn as you get older is that actually the boys that know more than you is the boys on the field, probably. And if you don't listen to them, then woe betide you. So as much as you can sit down there and you understand exactly what is going on, but then ultimately why decisions are made and everything else like that, you need to listen to the boys. And it was hard work, and and it always has been for me, because I don't think it ever comes naturally. I think what it is it's something that I have to work at. And I like to be one of the first in the morning, one of the last away at night, and I like to sit there and just soak up the atmosphere and see what's going on. I don't know whether you've seen it at all, but there's something called the Change House, and on one of these RFU courses, they showed us this Change House, whereby you're either in denial, room of content, and all this sort of stuff, where you're going around this room, and I'd constantly sit there and think, well, we've won 50 games on the trot at home for Leicester, and for me, it was, where am I sat? Where are we sat constantly? How do we keep on pushing forward? How do we stoke that fire? To keep so people don't turn up every weekend thinking this is just going to be a win. And you're constantly sort of evolving, changing. You're checking to see where you are mentally, and not only that, you're doing so with the coaches as well. Because if your line outs are going well and you've got 10 out of 10 for the last 5 games, the guy could be in this room of content, just sat there on his sun lounger, smoking his cigar, not realizing actually the biggest test is probably the next one, or the one after that, or the one after that, and you've got to have that. You've got to be stoking that fire the whole time. And so for me, hard work, understanding where people are, and just keeping them hungry and wanting to win more and more, and never backing off from that side of things.
And did you, in terms of your own identity, I mean, is it you'd mentioned, when you spoke to the players, that 10 minutes before you were the same guy and to holding that meeting, but internally, did you feel a shift as you were on a different side of the fence from the guys that you'd taken to the field and how did you cope with that?
A little bit, yeah, but not that much. Dorian West became godfather to one of my twins, and and I'm godfather to Harriet's daughter, and so yeah. I mean, there's still that relationship there, and when I see the boys, there's still that relationship, and both as a DOR and also as a player as well, and so I sort of cross both sort of codes, if you want, and still have the friendships from both sides of our lives, and that's the way I always wanted it to be. I didn't want to be seen to be, the director of rugby who is, is in charge, and what I say stands, and very dictatorial. I wanted the boys to have their say on how things evolved and whatever. I can remember going into, I'd always go to a meeting on the European games the day before a game, a big game or everything, and I'd get back and I'd say to the boys, guess what their coach said about our team, and and a lot of the time it was true, just in passing and something like that, but you'd flower it up slightly, and we got to a cup final, the first European Cup final, and we had the meeting beforehand, and I came back and I said, guess what their coach said? And Johnny has said to me, he says, Dean, he said, the boys are hyped up enough. We don't want to tip them out. Fair enough, mate. I'll back off on this one. And
good advice.
And if you remember the day we went out to play that against Stade Francais, we were lined up supposed to be lined up in the tunnel, and the boys were steaming. And the French boys didn't turn up. We were supposed to go out together. And Dave McHugh, the referee, was the Irish referee.
Yeah.
And we'd done something like about 7 or 8 games of his, knew exactly how he was going to referee, what he was going to say. We'd actually got people refereeing training using the exact terminology that he was going to do and everything else like that. Done all the preparation. And we were there in the tunnel waiting to go out, and the French boys didn't turn up. And I said to David, he says, where are they? And he said, they're coming. He says, don't worry. And he doesn't sound a long time, but European Cup final, you're due to go out together. 30 seconds doesn't sound a long time. 45 seconds, and it comes to a minute, and Jono's absolutely steaming. He's going, come on, Dave, where the fuck are they?
Yeah.
And eventually he just turns around and said, fucking cheating. French man just led the boys straight onto the field. And yeah, I don't know where I'm going with, but yeah, I think all the work you do, everything that you prepare for and everything can go out the window, because what we'd done on Dave McHugh just went out the window. As soon as we made that decision to just ignore him totally, go onto the pitch, and then there was this confrontation as the French boys eventually turned up and went onto the pitch. And I sort of knew that then that, you know, I knew then that we were going to win the game. I think we won 4-0, and it was only Diego Dominguez who kept them in the line to drop goals or penalty goals, because McHugh penalised. And in fact, Jono leading them onto the pitch, he knew he was going to get yellow carded, and he did. He got 10 minutes in the bin. But we were never going to lose the game. And the tone that was set from the boys on the Thursday, the Friday, and then the Saturdays, it just, you knew that, you know, history was going to be made that day at the club. So it's
very good.
yeah, but I don't know what the point was that he was going to make. But yeah, one of the momentous days for the club, actually, and one of the funniest days, actually.
Did the referee
Very
try and
good.
stop Martin Johnson running out, by the way?
Oh yeah, he was saying, "Oh, stay there." And Johnny did that again later on with England over in Ireland, didn't he?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they went out, and he went right, and they said, or whenever it was, he went right, and they said, "Well, no, you've got to be left." So, well, we're here now. We're staying here. And it's a sign of a great leader. It is, and as I said before earlier on, people turn around and say that Jono was a great leader. Just, you know, you'll follow him over. He was more than that. He's a great tactician, understood the game incredibly well. Why England got rid of him when they did as a manager, I don't know. I wouldn't have picked him to begin with, just purely because he hadn't coached or whatever. But then once he'd grown into it, I thought he was going to be a brilliant coach. And the Manu Tuolangi, the Tyndall bit, and everything else like that were just sideshows, and they should have just stuck with Jono, because I thought he was going to be an outstanding England manager. And why they got rid of him when they did, I'll never ever know. So he's got far more brains than a lot of these boys have got together.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I mean, in terms of you know, Jono, obviously great leader, and you know, leadership is one thing. But what would you say when we talk about what business can learn from sport, and sometimes vice versa? What do you think are the traits of sport that CEOs of big companies should be looking at?
Well, you tend to find in sport that the best teams that win have a great culture about them. And it's understanding how to create that culture, which I think is key. And I think a lot of people in business, they, you know, and with that culture, you've obviously got your vision, your mission, your strategy, and all this sort of stuff, that, you know, your identity and everything, and your values. And I don't think businesses actually look at that in depth. And you know, having that understanding where you want to be in 3, 5, 10 years' time. You know, where does the club want to be? You know, what identity, what do you want to be known by? And companies don't spend enough time doing that, looking at that and understanding it. And with that, then creates the buy-in from the workforce, the understanding of where they want to be, why we're doing certain things. You know, the bigger picture is this. And they'll understand more, but keeping people in the dark and just shoveling shit all day long, the old mushroom approach, just doesn't work at all.
Yeah, I would say that business is well behind sport when it comes to leadership, teamwork, culture, for sure. I would say that, and probably one of the reasons why we do these podcasts.
Yeah, very much so. And you see it. You know, I've got a son who's in the police. I've got a son who's in the Marines, and you're listening to those boys, and they're very similar in some, more so the Marines and probably the police, because the police is very sort of, has to be PC and everything these days, and they're sort of hamstrung a little bit. Whereas you're training a Marine to go into battle, and you know, which is a very different thing. And I've got a daughter who's a teacher, and a lad who's a gardener. But certainly from those two boys, if it's just direct comparisons, both twins, you know, it's very, very differing sort of viewpoints on how to run a team. But at the same time, they're both suited for what the roles are that they're asked to achieve.
Absolutely. And sometimes as well, I think sport can learn from business in terms of governance of the sport. I mean, would you have any views on that?
Yeah, totally, and I totally agree with you. And I don't think that we spend enough time looking at governance, if I'm being honest. And then ultimately, it's the communication of it as well. It's one thing having the governance, then it's communication and the clarity surrounding it, which I think is really important. We don't have that. I think it's getting better. I think we as a sport at rugby is getting better, and I think it's, but there isn't that clarity there, and the governance isn't quite probably as strong as it should be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Fitzy, we discussing, or you mentioned to me about when the game went professional, and you talk about Scottish rugby union, weren't you, Fitzy? In the Welsh rugby union, they've got big like legacy
Yeah, yeah. I
issues
mean,
with
it's
stadiums and stuff.
for sure. I mean, as we remember back to when the game went professional, the Scots had already just finished Murrayfield, so we're left with that huge debt, and it's probably taken them the last 20 plus years to sort of get their house in order to sort of get the situation right where they can move forward, and they seem to have been turning that corner. And I think I look at it in a way, and I'm sure, well, I'm interested to know what you think, Dean, but there's a season for that planning in terms of a team. You do all that culture and code of conduct and vision and goal setting in that pre-season phase as part of, well, you're putting in that heavy work ready to hit the competition and the championship part of the season later on, hopefully. And I wonder whether or not there's enough of that intentionality with the business side of the game and the governance side of the game to really give the unions and the sport the solid footing that it needs to be all that it can be.
Yeah, you look at it from a team's perspective. Every weekend, you're judged. You're judged by the media. You're judged by the general public. You're judged by yourself, by the players, your own spectators, and your results are out there and made public every week. But that doesn't happen from the RFU point of view. You'll get your annual report and everything else like that, and you'll get 5 or 6, 7 games or 8 games or whatever it is that England play in a year. But every club game, you are there, you're judged for probably, you'll play, 32, 35 weekends of the year. And you're judged by, as I say, not just yourself, by spectators and media and all that. And on top of that, you're not just judging yourselves, you're analysing yourselves, you're reviewing yourselves, you're looking at trends that are forming, you're throwing curveballs every weekend. Like in business, but your star player may get injured, all sorts of curveballs are thrown, and you're surviving on budgets, which then are affected by central income, by sponsors, by spectators. And that may change through this season as well. So all these things are adaptable, changeable, and you're constantly changing and adapting to what's what the parameters are that are being thrown in front of you. So yeah, I think there's so much could be learned from sport, whereby every weekend you are in the coalface and you are being challenged every weekend. And a lot of businesses don't every weekend get challenged in that way, or every week. And it's, you get quarterly reports and then 6 monthlies and then 3 quarterlies and then annually. Whereas from a rugby perspective, bang, you are there and you are examined every week. And there's no letting. And if people don't like it, they'll let you know.
Yeah.
For sure. And would you, sorry, Moo, there, and would you have built out that sort of firm foundation in that pre-season phase with the group, looking at your parameters of how you were going to operate as a group, your code of conduct, your vision, your goal setting, so that you had that solid base to move forward and deal with the challenges on the week-to-week basis of the competition? Would that be
totally, yeah. And
yeah.
you revisit it throughout the
Yes.
season as well, time and again. To the point that I like openness, and after every game in certain clubs, I've turned around and I said, well, we'll have this sort of this debrief at the end of every game, and you have a 10-minute debrief at the end of every game, whereby you have the right to just turn around and call out whoever, whatever, and it could be the coaches, it could be the hooker, it could be whoever it is. And it's nothing, it's never a personal thing. It's just things that we could have done better, mistakes we made on the day, things that need improving, or somebody may have let somebody down by not doing something. And you have this debrief of 10 minutes at the end of every game. You give them 10 minutes to sort themselves out, bang in the change room, everybody in, right, what do you think? And then you have this, right, you didn't do that, you didn't do that, you didn't. So, and again, that sort of creates that openness so that when it comes to the Monday, again, they're quite happy to speak again openly about what's going on and think about it. And you don't always get it right immediately after the game, but that's what your perception is. And then ultimately, if they talk about it, then they'll have a couple of beers that night, and they won't be afraid to then discuss it over a couple of beers as well. And then come back on a Monday, and then the truth's out, and then it's just floods out. It really does.
Well, to have that atmosphere of honesty, where feedback can be given, where no one's hiding from it, brings you closer as a group and more able to and more resilient to deal with problems as they unfold. That's great.
Yeah, very much so. But like you say, the start of the year, you will visit everything, all your values, how you want to be seen as, and what your goals are. You'll address your goals and everything else like that, and then ultimately you'll be looking to just revisit them again throughout the season. They also do appraisals with players. You'll do player appraisals at the end of the season, but then you'll do reminders when you come back in. And then on top of that, not just the reminders, but then periodically throughout the season, you'll probably have another 2 or 3 throughout the season, just to be able to sit down there with the players and say, look, where are we? And again, that sort of change house that I was talking about earlier on, you're playing well, you're getting 3 turnovers a game, and you're in this content room, or, how do you renew? How do you get better? What do you need to do? We need to stimulate you. We need to get you to be a better player. How do we do that?
Sure.
And in your mind, you will have an idea how to do that, but you want it to come from them.
For sure.
And I was going to say on those 2 points, well, the points that you're making, Dean, businesses definitely a lot, reactive. They do their annual reports and 6 monthly appraisals, and they're quite happy. Really, it's only when it's too late will they act. And I think businesses really got to be a bit more attuned to people and leadership. And I suppose the other ironic thing as well is that sports teams are accountable every Saturday, every Friday, every time they play, probably every training session with the players. But sometimes when we go on to governance, the accountability is probably less than even business. And I suppose perhaps that needs to change within the game to improve it. But some might agree, some might not. But yeah.
I was looking at it's very difficult to as an individual sport. If you're looking at athletics, for instance, how does somebody get better? I was watching the 800 meters on the what is it, the Diamond League the other day, and the British lass won. But the girl that came second, or I think she came second or third, with 300 meters to go, the commentator just turned around and said, "Oh well, she just she can't keep up with her, she can't compete with her." I just thought, well, actually, from a commentator's point of view, it's actually quite cutting. If that girl, so how does that girl then understand what this guy said and then get better? And how does she, you talk about resilience and all these sort of things, but everything is played out in the press from a sporting point of view, and her deficiencies, what she needs to do. This guy would have been so blunt. And sometimes sport is like this, so blunt, it's so in your face that there's absolutely no hiding place. Unlike in business, whereby there's facts, figures, and accountants and
lawyers.
But in sport, there is absolutely zero hiding place, and it can be that blunt.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how the current crop of players and sports people with social media how they deal with it. I just do not know.
Yeah, I think social media is a big reason as to
Mm,
why the game has changed so significantly.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I don't know whether we're going down the right path as well. Change it from the Premiership to the Prem. I don't understand that at all. And from the Championship to the Champ or the Chump or whatever it is. I don't understand that. And you're just
Yeah,
appeasing a younger generation. But actually, what you're not doing is, and whether they've done the trends of in terms of the age range of people that go into games. If you're looking at somebody under 20 or under 18 and they call it the champ or the prem, that's fine. But if I'm talking to my mates, we'll talk about the Premiership, and everybody else will talk about the Premiership, but we won't be talking about the Prem. And my lads who are in their 20s won't be talking about the Prem, they'll be talking about the Premiership. So I don't know which age range they're looking at, but to change it, I don't understand it. And sometimes these things are done on a whim, aren't they, without actually going through all and doing all the soul searching that goes with this and the research that really needs. So
yeah, absolutely. I don't even know what the second division. I call it second division. Is that the championship, or
no, the champ now.
is
It's the
it a
champ.
champ? I don't even know
So
what it's
so
called.
bizarre.
National
Yeah.
One, Premiership, or what? I don't know. But anyway, so
Yeah, I still haven't got my head around why they made those decisions, but
yeah,
there's obviously people who know far more than I do
yeah,
about the
yeah,
game and been around a lot longer. So,
cool.
So changing tack, obviously very important to be self-aware. How do you keep reflecting, improving such a long and illustrious career?
um, I don't know whether I am that self-aware, to be honest with you. I think I am. I think I understand what people think of me, um, and and I think sometimes what the media presents isn't always what you really are. And it's
Mhm.
amazing how many times people who sort of meet you say, "Well, actually, you're not what you come out or how you come over on the TV." And it's probably because I just don't trust the media to present you in the way that you really want to. So, which is why I just go into, you know, I think less is best when that comes, and they want far more out of you, but you're not prepared to give it. So, um, yeah. So, how do you? Sorry, what was the question? How do you keep
So
on?
yeah, I mean, how do you reflect and keep on improving? As you go through these seasons of life and in your career.
You just, if you've got a passion for something and you look at it in a particular way, you will always want to
Hmm.
to move forward. I haven't worked at a rugby club properly for 3 years, but I sit down there, analyze the Lions games with the Aussies, and looking at the championship games down in Australia, New Zealand, Argentina, and South Africa. And I find it fascinating. I love watching, I just love watching sport. And if you have that passion for it, and you're sitting down there just constantly trying to understand why certain things happen, and you go back over it, look at it time and again, and you will keep on evolving. I think you will do. The things that you'll sort of fall back on a little bit is the other stuff, the off-field stuff, which is you can pick that up pretty quickly. So, but the on-field stuff is probably the most important thing. Keeping ahead of the game, understand why things happen, having your own viewpoint on things, and wanting to move forward.
And if you had to describe your leadership philosophy in one sentence, what would it be?
I like to give people the opportunity to be what they want to be, and that could be an international rugby player to being a good Premiership player, and providing that they're honest about what they want to be and they're prepared to work on it, and I'll support them as much as I can. I'm a facilitator. I'm not somebody who creates something. I'll facilitate an environment for people to be the best they can be.
Thank you. What's next for Dean Richards?
I don't know. I'm getting a bit bored of not being involved in the game so much, and I actually quite like to get involved. I've looked at a couple of things, had a few offers which I'd not really been interested in. So I think I'm probably going to thinking about getting back into the game if anybody would have me. So, but yeah, I found the Aussie tour, the Australian tour with the British Lions a bit frustrating at times. But yeah, I love the game, and I still think I have something to offer in terms of a viewpoint on it, whether it's being a DOR or just being a mentor to a young coach. I'm quite comfortable either way, but I still feel I have something to offer. It's just whether other people see it that way.
I think you're being really
No
humble,
doubt.
though.
Yeah,
I
very
mean,
much
like,
so.
it's so much. Two Lions tours, World Cups, like England, Leicester, Newcastle, Harlequins. I mean, you're still relatively young. And
Well, that's very kind of you to say.
I'm just trying to get you on another podcast, Dean.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah.
No, but I mean, you're also, I mean, the people that you speak to, and I mean, people that know you say what a great rugby guy you are, and that comes across. You're a genuine rugby guy, and it comes across in the way that you speak. And it's to people, and in this podcast, I think it's fantastic. And I hope some club gets the benefit of your experience, Dean.
We'll see.
Lucky to have you.
Pardon?
Yeah.
They've been very lucky to have you. That's
that's
for
very,
sure.
that's very kind of you. I'm not. Listen, I think we're in an age whereby young is in vogue, isn't it? And whether it's in soccer or rugby or whatever it is, the younger generation, they're coming through and they're looking at the young generation more so than ever before. So, I'd probably see myself as, if anybody was interested in somebody to mentor a young coach, I'd be more than willing to do that. I'm not one of these guys who would tread on people's toes either. If somebody said that to me, I'd be totally straight and say, yeah, I'd do that, but I wouldn't do anything else.
Great. Okay. Now, I mean, in terms of moving on, I've slightly easier maybe questions. I certainly hope so. Fitzy's drafted these, so apologies in advance.
Are these one-liners?
These are quick fire questions and answers written by Fitzy. Right. So he's testing me. So, toughest opponent you've ever faced?
Toughest opponent I've ever faced. Michael Jones was, I think, a world-class player.
Okay. Yeah, great answer. And one thing people wouldn't know about Dean Richards and wouldn't expect.
I played the violin at school.
Wow. Okay. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your French? 1 being
probably about 6 or 7. My spoken French is pretty good, but my written French is appalling.
Okay. And the best captain you've ever played under?
Oh, dear me. For Nick Holder.
Yeah, that was a great tour as well. That tour, brilliant. Yeah. And
I did go back to that tour. People tend to forget. 1989, we played against a side that in 2 years' time, 2 years later, became the world champions, and won. And I think they look at this year's tour and they think how well that we've done against Australia, winning 2-1, and it could very well have been 2-1 the other way around. But that tour we lost one game on that tour, and it was a far longer tour. We had 30 players, and boys were doubling up from Saturday to Wednesday to Saturday. It's far tougher in some respects. And I thought it was an incredible tour. And I look at this year's tour, and this is why I looked at it probably less so with regard to being a typical sort of Lions tour. And I was a little bit disappointed with it, but
yeah. And that tour in '89, I mean, you lost the first test, didn't you, and came back to win 2-1.
Yeah, we did too.
Yeah, it was amazing, and the matches were amazing because they were so confrontational.
Oh, unbelievable! How we lost the first test. I mean, Australia were so dominant in that first test, and we came off the pitch and training that week. We had to play against the Brumbies on the Tuesday, I think it was,
Yeah.
And the boys went something like 20 odd points down going into half time, and then came back and thumped the Brumbies in the second half, which sort of set the tone for the rest of the week's training and everything going into, and the mindset going into the weekend. But there was huge bust ups, not fighting, but it was just so confrontational training all that week leading up to that second test. And you know the measure of the team, that the boys that played on that Tuesday or the Wednesday, they just turned around and said, and we're going to get up the next day and prepare whatever the team is that's selected for the weekend, prepare that team for the weekend. And I thought that's where Finlay was outstanding. He had to make some big decisions with regard to the Scottish boys, whether to pick them or not pick them. Made those decisions based upon what was right for the team, and I thought he led by example as well. I thought he was outstanding, and he would have been, had he been the guy that had dropped himself, and he's quite prepared to drop himself after the first test. Then he would have been there playing on the Tuesday and then backing it up. But as it happens, Geach and the boys said, no, you are our captain, and you will lead next week as well, which I think was totally the right decision to make.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that tour, it was inspiring watching that. I mean, I remember being at school watching it, and sure it inspired a lot of players at that time. And quick question as well. What would your players say about your leadership style?
Depends who you speak to.
Good answer. Do you want to leave that answer or elaborate?
I think it depends totally on who you speak to. It really does.
Okay.
So on the whole, the boys will say they've had a huge amount of fun working with me.
Okay. And apologies for this last question, Dean. Fitzy's written this one. Finish this. At the business leadership and leadership, you need.
Sorry? Say that again.
Okay.
Is this one of Fitz's or is this one of yours? It's yours, isn't it?
It's definitely one of his. So you've got him back to rights.
Humility, I think, is the
Finish this. At the business end of leadership, you need
humility.
Good answer. Good answer. Yeah. Brilliant.
Well, Dean, thank you. From Grand Slams to governance, from stocks down to building dynasties, your story shows the resilience, reflection, and relationships of what define true leadership. Thank you very much for joining us on the business end. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, chaps.
Thank you, Dean.
No problem.